Welcome to Lesson 3 of Intro to Python by STEMEncounters. In this lesson, we'll go over if statements, operators, and loops. This is by far my favorite part of programming, and it enables you to do so much with so little. Let's get started with operators. In essence, operators are just a way to compare two values. A more simpler way of understanding this is probably the less than or greater than symbol in math that many of you are probably familiar with. In math, we would usually use these to solve a problem or create an inequality, but in programming, we use it as a sort of parameter. In this lesson, we'll be covering 5 different types of operators: arithmetic operators, assignment operators, comparison operators, logical operators, and identity operators. Now, don't let these big names scare you. When you actually get more familiar with them, you'll find that they're really simple to understand. On the very top of our list are the arithmetic operators. These are your everyday operators that you've probably seen in like just algebra or like even middle school math. These are your plus, minus, multiply, and divide signs. What's special about them in Python, however, is the addition of the modulus, exponential, and floor division symbols. They look like the percent sign, which is modulus, 2 asterisks, which is exponential, and 2 slashes, which is the floor division. Modulus is simply just your division operator, but instead of the result being the quotient or like just the answer, you get the remainder. For example, if we did 5 modulus 3, we would get 2. So let me present this. So I don't know, var equals 5 modulus 3. If we print var, we would get 2. And the reason for that is when you divide 5, as I said, you get the remainder, right? So if we divide 5, it goes into it once. You put the 3 down, and then subtract the 5 by the 3, and you get a remainder of 2. And that's why we get a 2. The asterisk symbol, as I mentioned, means exponential. So think of exponents. If I do, instead of 5 mod 3, I do 2 asterisk 2, we should get 4 when we print this, because 2 to the power of 2 is 4. And our final arithmetic operator, which is floor division, is just the result of division rounded to the lowest integer value. Like the seal and floor from the last episode, here's an example. If we do 5 floor division 3, we print var again, we would get 1, since 5 divided by 3 is 1.6, and 1.6 to the lowest, closest lowest integer value, quite the tongue twister, is 1. Okay, so after our arithmetic operators, we have our assignment operators. Assignment operators are really crucial when trying to mess with loops, so make sure to listen closely for this one. These operators look like plus equals, minus equals, asterisk equals, modulus equals, divide equals, 2 asterisks equals, and 2 slashes equals. What they do is basically they allow us to add to the value of an already present variable. What I mean by this is, let's say that I have a variable var and it equals 2, which I have right here. And if we do var plus equals 2, we would simply, we're simply just representing var equals var plus 2. So let me make a different variable to show you this, equals 2. So if I did var plus equals 2, and I did num equals num plus 2, and I printed both, we get 4 for both. So let's do this with another example. This time we'll be using the exponential operator. So var this equals 2. What this means is just var equals var to the power of 2. Oops. 2. So if we, I don't know why I deleted the num. If we do both of these, we get the same thing basically. So these are quite confusing at first, so it's okay if you can to pause and just mess around with the other assignment operators that we didn't already use. Moving on from our assignment operators, we have our comparison operators. As the name suggests, these are for comparing two values, and they look like equals equals, exclamation point equals, less than equals, less than sign equals, greater than sign equals, less than sign, and greater than sign. These probably look familiar in math. These are your less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or greater than signs that we use a lot in math. One mistake that a lot of beginners make when they start using these is the error of using equals, like a single equal sign, when you should be using two equals. Basically, one equal sign is just used for declaring stuff and like when we declare variables and stuff. But when we want to compare two values, so let's say I have a num equals 3, we would want to use the 2 equal sign. So equals num, and this would, if these are the same value, which they are, this would return true. Also, make note that the exclamation point here, this is not equals, and the exclamation point denotes the word not in Python. Okay, moving on to our logical operators. Logical operators are basically just comparison operators, but for comparison operators. You'll understand that when I give examples later. Another thing to note about logical operators is the fact that they are words, not symbols and characters. What I mean by this is your logical operator will look like and or not, as I have laid out here. In addition, all of these logical operators will return a Boolean when you use them correctly. Starting off, the AND operator, AND logical operator, is used to compare to comparison operators. So what I mean by this is we have our variable num equals 2, and if I do num greater than 2 and num less than equal to 2, double equal to, that's a simple AND logical operator. What this is doing is it's scanning if both of these operators are true, and in our case, one of them is incorrect. So what this will do now is return false. I think if I print this, yeah, we should get false, because sure, this is true, but this is false. You need both to be true. Our OR operator will, instead of both having to be true, only one needs to be true. So since num does indeed equal 2, but it's not greater than 2, this will print true because at least one of them is right. So if I run this will be true. Our not operator will reverse the Boolean result of it'll just reverse a Boolean result. So if I do, the syntax for it looks different. You just do not followed by parentheses and also the whatever you want to flip. So here, originally we got true, but if I do not, we should get false. And you don't really need another logical operator here. You can just do num equals 2, and this will return false as well because this is true. That's basically all there is to logical operators. Let's move on to the next operator, identity operators. Identity operators are pretty easy, and they're just like a wordy counterpart to the equals, and not equals operators that we learned before from comparison operators. Basically, they look like is and is not, and to use them, you just want to put them between two variables that you're comparing. So I'll make three variables here: bar equals 3, nar equals 2, and I'm going to use the is statement here. So I want to compare num and nar. So I'll do num is nar, and here num does equal nar. They're both 2, so I should get a return of true. Now if I do is not, what this does is it checks if they're not equal. So if I ran this, we should get false because they are equal. And now if I replace this with, let's say, var, and now they're not equal, and we should get true. And that's basically all there is to identity operators and operators in general. They're pretty important, so if you're confused by any of them, I would recommend going back into the video and just rewatching it. But if you're good to go, let's move on to if statements. The if statement is an extremely important part of programming. It lets us declare important parameters in all sorts of projects, and basically every like script or code out there incorporates it in some capacity. To use an if statement, you simply want to write the keyword if followed by your operator that we learned before, which is your parameter, and a colon. What an if statement will do is if the parameter is met, then your code will run, your designated code will run. So let me give you an example. So let's do if, let's declare a variable that equals to 2. To if num is equal to 2, that colon, don't forget the colon, it's a pretty important part of if statements. I often miss it a lot, but it's probably better if you don't. So now I'll just print maybe hello, and this will run because, well, 2 if num does equal to 2 and num does equal to 2. But what if I set it to 3? Right, then nothing's going to run because num does not equal to 2, it equals to 3. And you can do this with any parameter or any comparison like any of the operators we learned before. So I don't know, let's do num is less than 3. This will run because 2 is less than 3. And another important part about if statements is the else statement, which is like a, if this does not run, then we'll have backup code that will run instead. So let's do else. What am I doing? Else. Goodbye. Print. Oops. What am I doing? Alright. So here I'm setting num to 3, and that means num is clearly not less than 3 since it's 3. And this won't run, but else will run. Yeah, see how it ran. And then another thing is the elif, which is like a combination of the else and the if statement. So all you have to do is just type elif followed by a colon. And what this does is it lets you it's just a shorter way of doing like another if statement. And you need to include a parameter here, unlike the else statement. So num is equal to 3 and should run goodbye, because since it's not less than 3, but it is equal to 3. If I set this to, let's say, 4 and it doesn't hit any of these parameters, nothing will run. Unlike with the else statement, if I do else, this will always run. Oh wait, I forgot the colon. Yeah. And that's basically it for the if statement. As I mentioned before, you can use these with any operator as long as it prints a boolean, returns a boolean. So if you're still not that comfortable with these, you can go back and just mess around with them. That's beauty of a video. And yeah, now we're going to move on to loops. Loops are another really crucial part of programming and also Python. As the name suggests, they allow us to loop a set amount of code for a set amount of time. The two main types of loops in Python are the for loop and the while loop. We'll start by learning the while loop. The while loop will constantly execute code as long as a certain condition is always true. The best way to understand this is probably to see it. So here's an example. I'll set a declare variable pi equals 0. And whenever you write the while loop, you always want to start with the key phrase while and then your parameter. So I'll do I is less than 5, then colon, and a print hi. And whenever you have a loop, you always want to make sure that there's a way for you to complete the parameter, because otherwise your code will run infinitely and you'll have what we call a memory leak error, where your code runs infinitely and you eventually run out of memory. So in order to complete our parameter, I would want to do I plus equals 1. So every time this runs, I will get added once, and this should run 5 times and print 5 highs. And yeah, if I didn't have this, I might be in trouble. Yeah, it'll run infinitely. I'm gonna stop this before my computer stops running. Also, for these loops, make sure to always include a colon, as we did with the if statement. Alright, so that was the while loop. Let's move on to the for loop. The for loop is basically the while loop, but we use it to iterate over a sequence like a string or a range or an array that we will learn later. This explanation is kind of confusing, so I'll show you some code to make it easier to understand. We always start with the key phrase for, our variable name, in, and then the sequence that we want to iterate over. So I'll do a string, since I mentioned that first, and always include a comma. A colon, not comma. And then here you want to write your code. So I'll do print x. Now if I run this, I should get string. Now the reason why we do this is, why it looks like this is because x will run the amount of letters in the word that we chose times, so 6 times, and each time it'll represent the first letter plus n being the amount of times that this code is run. So in the beginning it's n plus 0, so it'll just 1 plus 0. N represents 0 because this is the first time that we ran. and it'll be s, and then next time it'll be 1 plus 2, or 1 plus 1, so the 2 slot, and then vice versa. It'll just keep going until you run 6 times, because we have 6 letters. The next thing I mentioned was the looping through range. What this will do is it'll run, you just decide a number, and it'll run that number minus 1 times. So the thing about Python is, for ranges and arrays that you'll learn later, we always start from counting from 0, and that means that if you have, let's say, okay, so to do range, you want to do 0 range parentheses the number that you want to hit. I'll do 6 in parentheses. Okay, so back on the whole 0 thing, what this means is I'll go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 5, and not 6. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Now if I run this, I should get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as I mentioned. Additionally, loops also include the break, continue, and else functions. These functions are included in your code to account for exceptions or pausing your loop. The break method will just stop your code when you will stop your code when you meet an exception. An example of this is 4x in, I don't know, string again. If x is equal to r, break. Now if I run this, make sure you have double equal signs, because comparison operators. Now if I run this, our code will stop when x is equal to r. So we should get, also make sure this is a string, because I messed that up. Alright, now if I run this, let's do here print x. I forgot to give that. Alright, so now if I run this, we should only get st and not the rest of the letter, because when it gets up to r, it equals r, and the loop will just stop working. The next is the continue function. This function essentially just pauses the current iteration of our loop. So for example, if we use the loop we created before and replace break with continue, our code should print string but without the r. Continue. Boom. Sting. The else statement for loops essentially functions like how it did for if statements. It'll basically just run a piece of code once the loop is finished. For example, if I wrote the loop 4x in string, print x, and then else print loop finished. Oh yeah, make sure colon enter print loop finished. If I run this, it should say loop finished when the loop is done. The last thing you need to know about loops is the concept of a nested loop. A nested loop is basically just a fancy way of saying a loop inside of a loop, so don't get too scared. An example of a nested loop is this. 4x in range 4, 4y in hello, print y. If I run this, we'll get hello 4 times. This is because we're running the loop to print hello inside of a loop that runs that loop through a range of 4. And yeah, that's basically all you need to know for loops. And that's the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next lesson.